All right, so we are back once again, and this is the Cheech and Manny show, true crime show,
Yeah,
where we are going to leave behind music a little bit. And to all our fans out there, this is Cheech and I always want to have discussions, not just about music, but I think this will open the door for more cool future stuff and conversations about like different topics like psychology, philosophy, literature, movies, etc., etc. So, but these segments will focus on true crime. We did the New England serial killer stuff, and we will be providing updates as they come. But now, I guess we'll inaugurate the first official episode. We are gonna delve into a famous case in history, involving crime and specifically psychopathic murderers and serial killers. And we're gonna start with a bang. So I'm gonna throw it over to Chris Carrero, the People's Basis. What's going on, Chris?
going on, man? How's everything, Manny? How you doing?
Oh, dude, man, life is good, brother.
That's great. I'm excited about this one. A little nervous. It's my first episode that I wrote about the Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. He is definitely up there. He's one of the sickest serial killers. Before we get into it, got a lot of papers here. Just want to thank Bobby for his nice comment uh, under the New England serial killer that we did. And we just had a great set the other night at Joey's. I think I sent you some footage of the band that was on before us.
Yeah,
We played
really cool.
the great Jim Wacker, and we did Jim plays with Chubby Checker. Had a wonderful set playing there. And I'd like to thank Bobby for that comment. And this other one, DEBORAM Callum, thank you for commenting and sharing, your information on there, and you know, and just some stuff non serial killer related. On the music stuff, we got music from Big Pink that's going to come out. We have, our serial killer show that we just did on Connecticut. The Connecticut and the New England serial killer. I wrote the Brown album that's going to be coming out. AM Gold is in the works.
That one I'm excited for.
Yeah, and I just wrote a epic on the Son of Sam. You know, so I was inspired by my second favorite Manny Grossman. I can't stop talking about that dude. I've been obsessed with his podcast. But today we're going to talk about the Night Stalker. And I recommend our viewers watch if you haven't seen it, Hunt for a Serial Killer, The Night Stalker on Netflix. Because what that's going to do is that's going to help you understand what I'm going to talk about a little bit. I'm not really following that form of the documentary, but it'll help you get a visual of what it was like. They have a lot of cool footage from the 80s, and detectives are from the detectives back then to the detectives now. They're all older and stuff. So we could get right into it. About Richard Ramirez. Okay. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. He's an American serial killer and sex offender. His killing spree occurred in Los Angeles and San Francisco. Now, I didn't know they're 500 miles apart, Los Angeles and San
Yeah,
Francisco.
dude, I went to Los Angeles and I told my friend, first of all, Los Angeles is huge, first of
Yeah.
all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You need a car to get around. No
Yeah.
one walks. That's the
It's,
first thing. Next thing though, San Francisco Bay Area, dude, it's far. And when you go to California, you usually take a plane there.
right, right, right.
Like it's crazy.
So that was his killing spree. And that's like 500 miles. That's like this is almost like the Connecticut, like the New England serial killer.
Yeah, no. And actually that's a great point. Like just really quick, like most people are ruling out, well, these murders aren't connected. I mean, if Richard Ramirez was doing this in that span of like land, I mean,
Yeah, Now he took the bus. He took the Greyhound bus to go to hit to his to go to San Francisco and L.A. And he spent a lot of time in Arizona, but he didn't do any killings in Arizona. He had family there. But so this is kind of a nice little link. 500 miles is So I know from where I am in Portchester to going up to like say the Adirondacks, that's 300 miles. So almost going to Canada is 500 miles from where I am, or maybe 800 miles.
Right.
So it's pretty far.
That's far.
So Ramirez was like bouncing. Why he chose San Francisco, I don't know. But I just found that fascinating. Um, so from April 1984 to August 1985, he killed 14 people during break-ins. He would kill at night. He was called the Night Stalker, and he was convicted and sentenced to death in 1989. He didn't die in 1989, but he was sentenced in 1989, and he was going to get the death penalty. He died in 2013 of cancer, waiting to be executed. I think it was by gas chamber. They were gonna kill him. That was back in
Mm.
the 80s. They probably would have changed it by the time he was gonna die. Probably the lethal injection, but he died before he was gonna get killed in the gas chamber. His crimes were influenced by a troubled childhood, and that's something we'll definitely talk about. Um, he was badly abused by his father, and he developed brain damage at 10 years old. He got into Satanism in his teens, which he learned from his older cousin, a Vietnam vet who had schizophrenia and post traumatic disorder, who bragged about all these killings from the Vietnam War. And he also killed his wife in front of a young Richard Ramirez, who was about 14 or 15.
Mm.
So Ramirez learned military skills from his cousin. The guy's name was Mike, and he would use these on his killing spree.
Mm.
So, man, I might jump around a little bit. He left Texas at 15. He moved to LA. He was really into Satanism at this time. Now, I've been researching if he was in a cult, because me and satanic cults. I'm always linking them
Right.
to murders and stuff.
Right.
Because I was told I actually met somebody in Arizona in a bar one night who knew Richard, who went to high school with him in
Mm.
Texas, which was like creep me out. And I think she's the one that said, "Oh, he was in satanic cults in Texas." This is way back in the day. Um, so what he did, he became a drug addict at 15. He'd break into people's houses and steal to get money to support his addiction. Um,
Mm.
so the murder spree was 14 months from LA to San Francisco, as we said, the 500-mile journey. His first murder was April 1984. Now, get this. This is sick. He used guns, machetes, tire irons, claw hammers. He strangled his victims um, with his hands, and he used rope. He would love to humiliate his victims, um, and some of them surrendered and to him, and he let them go, and they survived, and he just let them go. So some people lived to tell the tale. He was convicted on 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults.
Mm.
So this guy's a freaking psychopath.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and scary name, the Night Stalker.
Oh yeah, we'll get into that too. He got the death sentence. And the judge remarked, "His deeds were cruel, callous, and vicious. He is not a human man. He is pure evil."
Mm.
So, any comments on that before I talk a little bit more about his upbringing? This would be like part two, you
No,
know.
I mean it's pretty good. I mean, good introduction, and again, this is the the Cheech and Manny show, and we are talking about the infamous Night Stalker, aka Richard Ramirez,
Yeah.
who from April 1984 to August 1985, murdered did his horrific murders, and he's gone down in history as I think one of the worst serial killers, right? Among them, like there's a
I mean,
list.
we could talk, we could debate about that, him or Dahmer. And I've talked to
I,
people
I
about.
think that should be a future episode.
Yeah, I mean,
'Cause we'll go,
and no disrespect, to the families who lost the victims. It's sad. This is, it's always hard for the families when you talk about these things. If they ever watched, these episodes, I know when the Dahmer show came out, a lot of the families got pissed on Netflix. You know,
well,
for
I think, but I feel like, yes, like 100%, like we're not, I will say, like when we do these episodes, it's because with the true crime, like these type of people, first of all, like I feel as though they're fascinating, but also in a way that you want to make sure that tell people be careful,
yeah,
right? Like there are sick people, like and true evil does exist. And then the dom and I get it why people were mad at the Netflix Dahmer movie
yeah,
because I'll be honest with you, making a movie out of this is rough. I
yeah.
mean, like I get it at some level, but I don't
And
know. Like, we'll talk
my
about it in
opinion,
another episode. These guys become sort of like rock stars sometimes.
I think the Dahmer series was one of the best true crime series ever
Yeah.
made.
Yeah.
Ever made. I watched it like 3 times. I was really into it. He was, you know, who's sicker? We could discuss that. I mean, Dahmer ate people after he killed them, so maybe he might be higher on the pole there.
Right. But
You
this
know,
dude, I mean,
this
th-
dude,
this dude
not
murdered a 9-year-old,
yeah, and then
which
he
we'll talk about, but
and
yeah.
I want to keep it PG, but it is true crime. He would have sex with the bodies of the dead people and sometimes just masturbate on the floor. Like this is a freaking like I mean, this is sick. This is not normal. You know what I mean? Like this is and I'm gonna explain why he got to be this way. And I gave a little bit to it. So here's the backstory on Ramirez. He was born in Texas in 1960. He was the youngest of 5 kids. Now, his father is really the main reason, I think, and we'll talk about it, why he became
Hmm.
so sick. His father mentally and physically abused him. Okay, and this is interesting. He was brought up in pretty like a strict Catholic family from his
Well,
mother's.
he's Mexican, yeah.
Yeah, so he's coming from that Catholic background.
Right.
Started drugs at 10 years old.
Right.
Okay. Now, I don't want to go here yet, but I'm going to just throw this out there. Psychologist Michael Stone described Richard Ramirez as a made psychopath, not a born one. So just ponder that thought, and I'm going to throw the information at you, and we'll come back to that. Um, his schizoid personality disorder contributed to his killing. Now, his father knocked him out when he was 6 years old, and he developed brain damage. He developed temporal lobe epilepsy and aggressivity. Maybe you have to help me with this word. Agressivity. Is that a word?
Hey,
Or
what
am
is
I
that? What is that?
aggressiveness? I guess. So he had temporal lobe epilepsy, aggressive.
Wait, aggressivity?
Yeah,
Aggressivity?
yeah, aggressivity. Like,
Aggressivity, like
yeah,
aggressive.
and hypersexuality. And I'll say it again: temporal lobe epilepsy. That's what he got from the blow to the head. Aggressivity, whatever that is, which aggressive is in there, and hypersexuality. So we'll get in. We'll get into that. Um, you know. So at 12 years old, his cousin took him, under his wing, and his cousin was a killer and rapist. He was messed up from the Vietnam War. His name was Mike,
Right.
and
But he did this, he did his yeah, he had already become a serial killer and rapist, which and during his service in the Vietnam War.
yeah, yeah. So
Right. So I think context wise, like I mean, that covered up his crimes, but horrible.
yeah, he was this guy Mike is his cousin who taught him how to be a psycho was already messed up. He was a rapist and a killer in the Vietnam War. He would show young Richard pictures of dead Vietnamese soldiers on Polaroids who were dismembered, decapitated, pictures of women. We will not go into it, but you can use your imagination. Richard was only 12. Now, once Ramirez was caught, he told the story to the interviewers, and he said he loved every minute of it. He was fascinated. He wasn't repulsed. He
Hmm.
loved the stories that his cousin Mike told him about Vietnam and killing soldiers and chopping them up, and he loved all the pictures.
Hmm.
Um, Now, his father would do sick stuff to this guy. He would crucify him and leave him in a cemetery when he was like 12 years old.
Hmm.
Okay. At 14, he got into Satanism, supposedly a cult, from my information from a woman in Arizona who knew him. He raped a woman at 15. He dropped out of high school in 1975. Then in 1982, he moved to California and he lived a nomadic life, roaming around, homeless in the LA area,
Hmm.
mainly around the Greyhound bus stations, using drugs, getting arrested on, petty things like robberies and drug busts. So let's go back to that, thought of what Michael Stone said, the psychiatrist, is Ramirez a made psychopath or a born psychopath? Using your psychology, what do you think?
So I think in this case he was made, not born. And I mean, as a psychiatrist that you mentioned, and he said that he was made, right? And as
Yeah,
opposed to being born. And I think we can also he was diagnosed with schizoid personality disorder,
yep,
which what ends up happening if you get sort of diagnosed with that, so it's a personality disorder. So in psychology and the DSM, there are personality disorders, right?
yeah,
And for those that don't know, PD, right, are mental health conditions. So they're characterized by sort of like very maladaptive patterns of behavior, cognition, your inner experience,
yeah.
and there's a bunch of them. But this dude diagnosed with schizoid personality disorder, which, if you're diagnosed with that, sort of makes you a potential psychopath or sociopath. And it's a tendency, it's sort of like characterized by a lack of interest in social relationships.
Yeah. And
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 it's
then I don't mean to cut you off, you know, get having that schizoid disorder and then getting beat. He was diagnosed with that as a kid, you know.
right, right. And you're already you have a tendency toward living a solitary or sheltered lifestyle. So
Yeah.
prone to secretiveness, emotional coldness, detachment, and apathy. Now, this definitely was brought about because of his upbringing, right? And
So he
obviously,
wasn't born a schizophrenic, you think? Like
well,
could
that's another mystery too. I'll be honest with you, that's another mystery. But it's not that he had schizophrenia per se, but he was diagnosed with this schizoid personality disorder,
Yeah.
which would offer evidence as to why he was so indifferent to the suffering of his victims.
Right,
So,
right.
really, who knows? But um, so and this is interesting what you said. Ramirez was knocked unconscious and almost died on multiple occasions before he was 6 years old. So
Yeah.
not a surprise why he had this detachment and also brain damage. I mean, this dude was
What is temporal lobe epilepsy? He had it gave him seizures.
Yeah, so it's a brain disorder that causes unprovoked seizures. And I think it was because of that brain damage that was caused by
Yeah,
his father, I believe. And yeah, he developed this. And not to mention also he was aggressive. I mean, he had
yeah.
aggressivity. I think that's how you
Aggressive.
pronounce it. And the fact that he was taken under the wing by his older cousin who was also a rapist, and pretty much he
And
was made. And
hypersexuality.
yeah, I mean what that is it's people that have uncontrollable sex drives, right? So the famous is nymphomaniacs,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And well, he's
It-
already, well, that could be, I'm not saying it's normal, but people can be hypersexual. But in his case,
yeah.
it
No,
led to like horrible things like
oh,
raping.
corpses, things like
Right.
that. I mean,
Right.
really,
And he got a thrill out of the suffering of his victim. So this guy
yeah.
he's a made psychopath. And you can blame his dad in a way. And I don't know what the heck his mom did in terms of raising him,
I
but
don't know much about his mom. I think she, being in the '60s, the dad was probably an alcoholic, I think, and ruled the family with an iron fist. He was also a psychopath for beating the kid. You didn't know Richard Ramirez was going to be a killer. At 5 years old, why you beating your kid to a pulp and
yeah,
crucifying him and putting him in a cemetery? Like how sick is that? You know what I mean? Like that alone, like, is just insane. And that's in the documentary. If you watch the documentary, they talk about that.
right.
Um, and then he was also known, I read, to sleep in the cemetery. He felt at home sleeping in a cemetery. So
Which is strange. And another thing also that made him was his usage of drugs. I mean, he started smoking marijuana at such a young age, at 10, and
yeah,
drinking alcohol. And then when he reached his adolescence, he began using LSD.
yeah,
And his cousin, that they bonded over their use of drugs and alcohol. And it was during this period, so it kind of coincided. So in a way, he kind of gave himself up to evil too, because he wasn't born this way. He began
no,
to cultivate an interest in Satanism and the occult.
yeah. And
And
his
then when he reached adolescence, he began to really, have sexual fantasies. I mean, we all have them, right? It's
yeah,
normal. But this dude, I mean,
yeah,
without going too much details, I mean, this guy was already fantasizing about this, which is kind of similar to most potential serial killers.
yeah. Dahmer had him.
I was gonna
Remember
say where they begin to fantasize,
in
and
the
then they
movie?
realize, wait a minute, I can do it, and then that feeds
Yeah,
their.
yeah. I mean, and it wasn't like, this guy, it wasn't like he was lonely or something. He was just sick. He wanted to kill. He didn't he Like Dahmer, I think deep down was lonely. He was a lonely person, and he even had relationships with
Well, we're talking about the schizoid personality disorder. I mean, people that get diagnosed with this are prone to self-isolation.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's like they kind of, for reasons they do it to themselves in a way,
yeah,
not through their fault. So for those two cases, yeah, they're very similar. I think these two are
yeah,
very similar.
yeah, I think so. Um so yeah, that was a great, an analogy of picking it apart and making sense of why he did that, because like some of this terminology I didn't know. I figured you would know it, and you nailed it perfectly. So we'll get into the murders. And as you mentioned, his first murder was a 12-year-old girl in the basement of an apartment building in San Francisco. He strangled her to death. Now that's pretty sick. Like, he killed a 12-year-old girl. That's disturbing.
Yeah,
That
with a
really,
switchblade.
yeah. I mean, there's 13 murders. I'm not going to get into all of them. I'm just going to talk a little bit about it. So in 1984, he killed 79-year-old, and I hope I get these names right, Jeannie Vinco. He snuck into her house. He
Hmm.
stabbed her to death. Um, And then his second victim was Maria Hernandez, a
Mhm.
22-year-old girl. He shot her and her roommate, who was an Asian woman named, hope I get the name right, Tano Liam.
Mm.
He killed both of them. And then when the cops went to the scene, there was three bodies so far, within a week apart. They called him the walk-in murderer. That was his first name because he would walk into the house. Could you imagine how sick that is? Guy
Creepy.
he walks into your house. And back then, like, people left their doors open and stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't like now. They didn't have Ring or anything like that. Um, so there's three. He was three victims in a week. He later, a little bit later, he didn't. In the beginning, he just went on a spree. He killed a guy named I don't know if he killed this guy. I'm not sure. Maybe you could look it up. Vincent Zarzar, 64. He shot him and his wife. His wife was in the other room and tried to shoot him, and he got really pissed.
Mhm.
And my information is he shot her three times, mutilated her body, and put an upside down cross in her chest, and
Mhm.
he stole everything in their house. He was also a thief, so that's
Right.
another thing but he made a mistake. He messed up. And this is something that I never thought of, like, that this is why cops are so good. He left footprints, and he had a pair of, I'm going to say the shoe wrong, maybe AVIA Avia sneakers outside the house. So the police made a cast of it. So they had something on this killer. Um, and they also had some bullets too. And the bullets were interesting because the bullets were primed with a red primer. Some
Mm.
people say they might have been from Vietnam. It might have been his cousins. That's a theory, like army ammunition.
Right. Right.
Uh, Killed a few weeks later. 66-year-old Bill Day and his wife. 2 weeks later, this is really, really disgusting and sad. He killed Mabel Bell and her sister, both 81 and 83. Oh my God, I don't even know how to say this. He killed them with a sledgehammer. I mean, you know, and this is the famous picture where he left lipstick on the woman's body and over the bed of the sign of a pentagram. Um, so the next day, he tried to kill a woman named Carol Kyle and her son, but somehow he let them go and he just robbed them. Um, a few weeks later, he killed a 75-year-old woman named Mary Conan, and he stabbed her to death with a butcher knife. And this is twisted. He carved in the wall Jack the Ripper in a pentagram. So where his influence were coming from. Like we
Mm.
said, that they're influenced, like, by the previous serial killers, in the past. So he was thinking about Jack. He wasn't as clean as Jack the Ripper, that's for sure. He didn't surgically kill them. He butchered these people. He kept killing more and more, stealing and leaving satanic symbols. Um, and he was really into the media. And we could talk about this a little bit. Like, he loved watching the news and he loved seeing himself on TV. They had a sketch of him, and it really didn't look like him. Um, the police did um, find the shoe company in California. They reached out to the shoe company, and there was only six that were size 11, and they
Mm.
were going to go and narrow it down to receipts and maybe get them that way. But the problem is, somehow this leaked out to the press, and the press leaked it out that he had this particular shoe and the caliber of his gun with the red primer, and it made the police so pissed of course, Ramirez got rid of his shoes right away. So
Mhm.
that goes out the window. So going back to this, why do you think they're so fascinated with themselves doing such evil things on TV? And is it a recognition that they need?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's that thrill that you first of all, you got away with it.
Yeah,
For any person that, commits these sorts of crime, the fact that you got away with it, I feel like brings up a certain high.
yeah,
So Richard Ramirez saying like himself, like he probably was enjoying it at this point,
yeah.
which, again, talking about his sort of, person that was made into a psychopath. I mean, it's sort of because at this point he already did, and mind you, the cops haven't caught him.
No,
And it's crazy because the first murder, not recently, but it was tied to him through DNA.
yeah,
But yeah, he probably saw it and got a thrill out of it, got a
yeah.
kick out of it, and said, "Okay, I'm gonna do more." Like, and I love
Well,
terrifying. He loved seeing people suffer. So he
yeah,
probably saw the news reports of people, horrified, and he was like, he loves it.
yeah,
And they dubbed him the Night Stalker.
yep. That was
So,
done.
so I think he saw himself as sort of some sort of sick celebrity.
And I think, well, they called him the Night Stalker, and I'm going to get to. I don't know where it. I think it came from. I don't know if anybody knows this. I'm trying to figure this out. There's an AC/DC connection to Richard Ramirez.
The AC/DC song, right?
Yeah. So I don't know if they just called him the Night Stalker now, where we are in the story, just because he's the Night Stalker,
Right.
or did the AC/DC hat show up because he wore an AC/DC hat? But to my research, the AC/DC hat shows up a little bit later. So, but maybe it showed up earlier and they put two and two together, and somebody who liked AC/DC and the press said, "Hey, let's go with this, the Night Stalker."
Right. Oh, I was gonna say, I'm not sure what the press were calling him, but whatever it was, I mean, you know,
Well,
the
at this point, he's the Night Stalker, and I'm just trying to figure out, like, did the
okay,
AC/DC
good.
did the AC/DC hat show up first, and then someone from the press said, "Let's just call him that because of the song," which probably made him even more happy because he was an AC/DC fan, obviously. Um, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on because it gets weird. Uh, so it leaked out to the press. The police were pissed off because they finally had a lead with the shoe and the caliber of the gun and the red, primer.
Yeah.
Now he's going to change his bullets. He's going to change his shoes. And the press always screws everything up for
Oh
the for
yeah.
the cops. I feel sorry for cops.
Well, it's
Police that
funny,
are.
you saw that perfectly in movies like Zodiac. I don't know if you've seen that movie
Oh yeah, yeah,
where the detectives, the press are trying to get the story
yeah.
and even like the private investigators are like, what? Like, they normally that's what ends up happening at the moment.
And it's always a leak from the police department.
Yeah.
So always a spy that
Right.
leaks or is getting paid well by the press. Um. So where was I? So obviously Ramirez got rid of his shoes, but the cops were on his trail because he had stolen a Toyota. This is where it gets interesting.
Hmm.
And a guy saw it on the news, and there was a partial license plate that a kid saw, on the Toyota. So they had a partial license plate. A guy calls up the police and he's like, my friend's car was stolen. It was an orange Toyota, and this is his license plate. And they said, yeah, that's your friend's car, you
Hmm.
know? So they narrowed down the Toyota. They got a fingerprint of Ramirez off the mirror
Hmm.
when when you're trying to look at cars behind you, and they got the fingerprint, and they didn't have any kind of fingerprint system now,
Hmm.
so it was like they at that time now it would be easy, but they did have a fingerprint system, but they'd have to know who the person was, and they didn't know who he was at this point.
And I will say just for going back to the New England serial killer case,
Yeah.
that's why if I can make like play devil's advocate, no pun intended, but play devil's advocate here, if there was a New England serial killer, they would be caught because with all the technology we have now.
Well, I mean, it's happening in the woods.
No, but the
So,
DNA and
right, 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 right.
the technology is so sophisticated,
Yeah,
and not to mention everybody has a cell phone too. So
yeah,
anyway, just an aside. But back in Ramirez's day,
yeah.
police tech, wasn't as sophisticated as
No,
it is now.
like, I mean, they had
And there were
Richard.
no computers. Cheech. There were no computers as we had. There were
Well,
computers, but not
yeah,
the level that we have today.
and you know what they did? If you watch the documentary, they made Betamax tapes that they sent out to San Francisco and LA to all the police departments to watch, and they would describe Richard Ramirez and what he's doing, and like they figured out in San Francisco. Wait, this at this point, and this is a good point I left out. San Francisco police and LA police were together working on this, saying this is the same guy. We got the same bullets. We have the. I don't know who found the shoes. I think it was LA, but they also found him in San Francisco. So they knew it was the same guy. So they made these videotapes that they would send to each other
Mm.
on how to, on the units and how to work on this maniac. This is where it gets interesting. So they got the car, they got the fingerprints off the dashboard or whatever. They also had tip lines. Like back then, there was tip lines. I wonder if they have that now. Now it probably would just be texting for the Connecticut serial killer. But tip lines were a big thing back then. Um, so a guy who knew Richard Ramirez called the tip line. He was a bum and he lived at the Greyhound. So apparently, the Greyhound bus station in LA was like where all the homeless people lived, and Richard Ramirez was one of them. They lived in the homeless section. And this guy said, "Oh, I know a guy named Rick, um, and he told me that he's the Night Stalker, and he killed all those people." And the police went right, to the bus station. They interviewed the guy, um, and they found a radio.
Mm.
And the guy said, "This is Rich's radio." And that radio was stolen from one of the victims' house that he killed. They matched it. So right there, they knew, okay, this guy Rick. They didn't know Richard Ramirez has this radio, and supposedly that's where they found the ACDC hat. It was like in his area where he would like live.
Mm.
Um. So at that point, let me see that. So yeah, the radio was traced back to one of the houses where the person was killed. So then all of a sudden, other people started to come out, and they said they knew him. And then the police eventually was interviewing a lot of people, and they said, "I know this guy. He's got bad teeth. He wears an ACDC hat. He smells like a goat." They said he's just he's got bad skin, and he lives around here. We don't know his name. Supposedly it's Rick. And finally, one of his friends they tracked down, and they got the guy, and they said, "You better tell us who he is," because he was seen with this guy. And the friend was like, "F you, I'm not telling you nothing." He was like a street guy, a bum type of guy. So the police officer got violent with them and was gonna like hurt him. And then he said, "His name's Richard Ramirez. Don't hurt me." So then they're like, "We got him, Richard Ramirez. We got a fingerprint." So they go back. Let me see where.
No, and it's crazy. Just I'm thinking when you're looking also at like the New England cases that are current. At the time. And I think hopefully our viewers out there understand this, that they were hunting the serial killer down. Like
Yeah.
Ramirez was getting away with this. And it's crazy because I think did you mention the Night Stalker, the Hunt for a Serial Killer thing on Netflix?
Yes.
Yeah.
I really think, after you watch this, watch that. Because I might have missed some things, but I'm not following it verbatim or whatever,
No,
but
no, no,
a
no.
lot of information I'm talking about is there, but you can visualize it and see it.
Right.
You can see the real footage and you can see him, what he looked like and stuff. But once they got the fingerprint and they matched it um with his name, they got Richard Ramirez. They knew who he was. He was a petty thief, a drug addict. He was arrested many times. Um, at one point, they were trying to get him because he had really bad teeth. I don't know how he paid for it, but he went to the dentist and
Right.
they rigged something up in the dentist's office. So they said, if Ramirez comes, hit this button and we're gonna come. And the dentist said he'll be here because he's got a problem with his tooth. And sure enough, Ramirez comes and the dentist is hitting the button, but it doesn't work. And by the time the police got there, Ramirez is gone. So they had the warrant for him and they were trying to get him, but they could not find him. So finally, they convinced, and they had to convince the police commissioner to have a press conference and literally say his name and show his picture. And they did a press conference and they said, we have the Night Stalker. His name is Richard Ramirez.
Right.
He's been arrested. His fingerprints match the crime scene. They went back to the crime scene to get more proof. So they had this case built up that it was definitely him. They were like 100%
Right.
sure
Oh,
it's him.
and that's my point with your we were talking about the New England serial killer. Although many people have dismissed, there's no serial killer in these cases. There's no connection. I mean, the problem is that while detectives and police are trying to gather the evidence, and you know, when Ramirez was doing this stuff, I mean, he, it's crazy because at the time the murders seemed disconnected. So the murders
Yeah.
and sexual assaults in 1985 LA seemed disconnected, and detectives were convinced. And so just to, you never know,
Yeah.
especially with now that, we,
Well, I think ballistic shows like when the same bullet shows up in San Francisco and California in the same style of murder, they know it's connected.
but you have
They
to build a case, and it
Yeah,
takes time. So
yeah,
while
yeah.
this is happening, he keeps murdering, which is
It,
it's
that
horrifying. So
which could
just
be
with the New
going on
England
today.
case, be careful out there because
Yeah.
if it could be the case that we're dealing with another serial killer, or in this case might be organized. But yeah,
But the cops probably aren't saying anything because they're building a case and they're so confused
right,
on the New England case.
right.
You know, um, Crime Stoppers. It was the
I know.
commercial. So basically, they got him. They have a warrant for him. Everybody knows in LA what he looks like. They know his name. But guess where do you think this is like fate? Where do you think Richard is at the time? He's not in LA. He has no clue. He's in Arizona visiting his cousin or his brother. So this was meant for him to get caught. If he
Mhm.
was in LA and he knew, you know, like he was all over the place.
Right.
Because in Arizona, I don't think he would have been on the news in Arizona. I don't, like I was asking my dad this. I'm like, do you remember this in the 80s? And he's like, no, because it was California.
No, and let me backtrack because I thought that Ramirez saw himself, but apparently he went to go visit his brother. He
Yeah,
he was unaware that he had become the lead story in virtually every major newspaper and
yeah,
television news program across California.
yeah. And he's in Arizona, a couple states away, you know, and then he hops on a Greyhound bus
Right.
and goes right back to LA to the homeless place, the Greyhound bus station. Doesn't know that there's undercover cops dressed up as homeless people, and they're ready to get him.
Right.
And this is where this gets nuts, and especially in the documentary. So when he came back off the bus, he noticed some peculiar looking homeless people. They were they were cops, and he probably he sensed it, and he started to walk around, and people were looking at him, and he looked at the newspaper, and it said his name and his picture, and he freaked the fuck
No,
out.
and this Hispanic newspaper uh, um so first of all, the Hispanic woman that fearfully identified him, I don't know if you saw what they kept calling him, El Matador,
What does that mean?
which in Spanish is the killer. They kept
Yeah,
fearfully saying El Matador, El Matador. And then I
yeah.
think you're leading up to this on the newspaper, Spanish newspaper La Opinión, the opinion. There was a headline that called him El. By the way, the Night Stalker in Spanish is Invasor Nocturno,
Wow, that sounds
Night
creepy.
Invader, Invasor
Wow.
Nocturno.
Oh my god. So he starts freaking the fuck out. He jumps on a bus and hoping that the bus will take him, back to like Arizona. The bus driver recognizes him, gets out of the bus, goes to a payphone, calls the police. He gets off the bus. He starts to like hijack a car to get in. By the time he gets to the car, everybody recognizes him, and a couple of dudes start beating the living shit out of him. They get him, they throw him to the ground. He had head injuries. In the documentary, you see him. You literally see this footage live. They filmed it. He's in the police car with his head like all bandaged up, and he's bleeding. And you see the people. They used a part of a picket fence, and they started beating him. And the cops came, and they did. And the one cop, the one detective, was like, "Don't kill him, because I want to interview this guy. I hope he doesn't die. I hope they don't, because they were ready to just kill him, but they. I don't want to say luckily, but they should have killed him. But they saved them, got him in the car, and they took him down to the police station. And he confessed in the car. I'm Richard Ramirez. I did it. I'm the guy. And this is where it gets interesting. It gets funny. Not funny, but when they got him and they interviewed him, the main guy in the case who really is responsible is Frank Salerno. Um, and Frank Salerno was famous for the Hillside Strangler, which was a few years earlier.
Hmm.
And this freaked Frank out. And the guy is really like funny on the documentary, the way he tells the story. You know, he um he says to him like Richard said to Frank Salerno, "I'm impressed with you. I know who you are. Like you did a good job. You did a really good job trying to track me down." And he said Frank Salerno said that freaked him out. That Ramirez knew everything about him. He said he knew that he was the Hillside Strangler. He broke that case. He had stuff to do with Ted Bundy, and he was intrigued by that. He was like, "Oh my God, like wow, like he was impressed with the cop because those were his heroes." And then Frank Salerno jokingly says Richard Ramirez put his head down and he started to tremble and shake, and he says he looked up at him with his eyes, and he said his eyes were pure evil. And he
Hmm.
says, if this guy starts floating in thin air, I'm out of here. And he was like, this guy is pure
Wait, who
demonic.
is this?
Frank Salerno, the main guy on the case,
Oh,
the cop who broke the case.
wow.
And Ramirez knew everything about Frank Salerno. And that freaked him out. Like he could have came to his house and killed him. You know what I mean? And his family. He was like impressed with him that he did all that work on Richard Ramirez, on
Right.
himself.
Right.
Makes sense. Anything so far? Any questions on that or any comments? I mean,
Dude, it's riveting. It's like a movie.
yeah,
And
it's what I was
no, and the
trying.
shocking part is the way he gets caught. It's like so cinematic of what exactly happens. And
Yeah.
Um, it's pretty. I mean, it's horrible. His case. I mean, I'll be honest. Even like being the case, I can't read anymore. Like it's too horrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like,
He's gruesome. Like I don't know if you would.
the stuff that he did. It was,
And just this case of what's going on here, how and I and hopefully maybe we'll talk about this. The role of Satan in his life, which
oh yeah.
I think he's drawing the pentagram. Which, by the way, obligatory Rush reference. Rush gets flagged for this during the time Satan Panic, which by the way, with killers like Ramirez, I get it. Like how heavy metal was using like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the satanic pentagram or the inverted stuff.
Yeah.
Rush definitely wasn't into that, but
No. Well,
I think I can see the panic just based on this.
the Satanic Panic gets involved in this, believe it or not. I'll get into that, and I'll get into the whole ACDC thing. Let me talk a little bit about the trial. Um, but like you're right, like the way he got caught, it was like he's in Arizona, and in Arizona they didn't know what was going on in California. But like, I. I mean, it made the newspapers in New York. I knew about the nights. Maybe it was after he got caught. You
Well,
know what I
what's
mean?
interesting was that it was old Spanish women that caught him and kept saying, "Oh, el matador," and they based on the newspapers that because I'll be honest with you, the reason why it would be in the Spanish newspapers, why? Because there's a large Hispanic community in that
In
area, not just California.
East LA, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, right. So, and when they saw that, um, Ramirez fled in panic. He's like, "Oh
oh
shoot, oh
yeah,
no!" And the police are right around the corner. And then his mistake was that he tried carjacking that car, and
yeah.
these two men come over and just started, and the
They,
husband started uh, beating this dude to a
they
pulp,
beat his ass, yeah,
and they
deserved.
would have killed him.
Yeah, but the cops and in the documentary they interviewed the cop who got there, and he said they didn't want him dead because they needed him to confess, and they needed they had to like really interrogate him for a while. But imagine being Richard Ramirez coming back from Arizona, thinking
Right.
like, oh, who am I going to kill tonight? And he got a surprise like that. That was meant for him to get caught. Like he's in Arizona. He comes home and boom, he gets caught. And it's like a movie, And you got to see the documentary. You got to see the scene. They have footage of it. It's brutal. It's like they're beating him.
Yeah.
It's like kind of like a riot. It looks like a riot was going on. One lady said it's like the Oakland A's or LA Dodgers won the World Series. That's how many people were out there, screaming and they're so happy. And there's one scene when they got him. It's like a parade. They had him in the police car, all cops in front, all cops in the back, helicopters above him. A woman flashes her boobs at him in the car,
Why?
and to see sick people. And the cop goes, "See, you're famous now." And of course, that's what he wanted. He wanted that kind of notoriety. Um, so a little bit about the trial. Now, the trial went on for 14 months. It cost 1.8 million dollars. At the time, it was the most expensive trial in California.
Yeah, I think it rivaled the O.J. Simpson one,
I
which
was
is
just gonna say
crazy.
OJ beat him in 1994. Um, and during this time, during the trial, he became a rock star. He started
Very
to grow
similar
his
to
hair.
Dahmer. And I think this
Yeah.
occurred during the same time or before, Cheech.
Um, this is a little before Dahmer. Dahmer was more, I believe, the late '80s, early '90s. If I'm pretty sure. Dahmer was killing though. Dahmer was definitely killing around this time. I
I was
think
gonna say, yeah, yeah.
Dahmer graduated high school, I think, in 1982. And I think in the '90s is when Dahmer got caught, right before OJ. right before the OJ case. I think it was like 91 he got caught. Dahmer 92, something like that. So he's pre Dahmer. Um, so what he did is he grew his hair in the 14 months. He wore all black, and he had a fan base coming to the court. So there were like these vampire people, these Satanists, heavy metal people,
Wait, like
cheering him,
heavy metal,
like dark death metal, black metal, kind of satanic metal dudes, girls, goth girls, witches, come into the trial cheering him when he would come out and stuff. And the creepiest picture is him with the pentagram on his hand. You ever see that picture?
yeah. I mean, I don't even
And,
want to look at it because it
and,
scares me.
and he puts it up to the judge. Like he was just like, I don't care. So he loved the notoriety of it. Um, and then he basically got sentenced after the 14 months for 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, and rape charges. And he got the death penalty. And it's crazy it took so long for him. He died in prison in 2013. Like he didn't die. And this happened in 1989, the trial, and
Mm.
he was in prison for a good 2-3 years before the trial. And while he was in prison, he married a girl, a fan. Someone actually married him,
And
which
again, and on future episodes, we're gonna break down famous serial killers like Richard Ramirez, and then on our future episode, we should definitely discuss like what is up with the fascination because that has from a psychological perspective, and we don't have to
yeah,
talk about it now just for time's sake. We'll wrap
yeah,
up Ramirez, but I also want to comment. Cheech, do you know the Bruce Springsteen? I gotta make a Springsteen reference here. Um, do you know the song Nebraska of his 1980 album Nebraska?
yeah, of course, yeah,
So that song, even though different, like Bruce Springsteen was sort of like beating, he made this strange song about it's the murder of in the 50s, which hopefully we'll talk when we sort of explore more history behind it, of Charles Starkweather. I don't know if you heard about this.
I heard of that. Yeah, it sounds
Yeah, so
familiar.
he made this song, and at the end of it, one of his last lines about that murder. So Nebraska is like his darkest album. And he this just a little connection. Charles Starkweather murdered 11 people over an 8-day period in 1958, right?
Wow.
And Springsteen sings from his perspective, but it kind of seems fitting what Richard Ramirez would say. At the end, he sings like they declared me unfit to live, said into that great void, right? My soul should be hurled. They
Yeah,
want to know what I did, why I did what I did. And he answers by saying, well, sir, I guess there's just some meanness in this world.
yeah,
That's like fitting to like Ramirez's response. Like,
yeah. Ramirez quoted something. I think I had it written down. Um, Something where like I did what I did and I got caught, and I'll see you in Disneyland.
which is kind of, I'm telling you, Springsteen kind of beat these responses, which are
Yeah,
haunting.
yeah. It's sick. And and then he married why would you want to marry him? A woman actually went there, got to know him. Why would he even get visits? Why would he have rights? A guy like that, I guess you have rights in prison to see people. I'm sure he was in what do you call it, confinement, where you can't see anybody and stuff
Mm.
like that. But yeah, he married someone um, who got remarried, who divorced him anyway. When before he died of cancer in 2013. And why did they wait so long before they gassed him? Like that's another thing I don't get. They put you on death row, and it takes like years to, someone like that, killer deserves to die sooner.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yet, John Wayne Gacy, I guess it's a state. He didn't wait that long before they killed him.
Mm.
You know, he was pretty quick when they got him. So yeah, that's pretty much his story. And then I remember as a kid. when it came out, I was like 15, 16. It was all over the news. The Night Stalker got caught, the Night Stalker. And AC/DC was huge at the time.
Hmm.
They were already huge, but, the 80s came and, like, just a little side note about AC/DC, their prime was
Wait,
like,
is that the song Night Prowler?
yeah, Night Prowler.
Really?
Yeah.
From their 1979 iconic album?
Highway to Hell. So,
Really?
so they linked the Night Prowler, to
Oh, you're right. Yeah, it's
I mean, they called him the Night Stalker, but the Night Prowler was, you know, and I think the AC/DC connection is from the press.
yeah, because Ramirez was a fan of AC/DC and
Yeah,
the song Night Prowler. But wait a minute. So did AC/DC write the song about him?
no, AC/DC wrote that song in 1978.
So it's just a coincidence. You're right. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm dumb. So that's
So,
just a
like,
coincidence.
yeah, so like in England, like Maiden has a song called Prowler. So in
Oh, you're
England,
right. Yeah,
they
right, right, right.
call them burglars, they call them prowlers. So in Australia, whatever, the Night Prowler. So the press linked it to the Night Stalker. I guess they didn't call it the Night Prowler; they called it the Night Stalker.
Right.
Uh, and AC/DC got flack because they basically said that the press was like, they tried to blame AC/DC's influence, like songs like Highway to Hell and the Night Prowler, that inspired him to kill. It wasn't his father or his cousin Mike. It was AC/DC.
It was, and they get blamed, and even though they have nothing to do with, I know.
Now I remember
It,
my mother was like, "Do you listen to AC/DC?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Like, well, this crazy guy in California was killing people, really sick, and he was listening to AC/DC, and I'm like, "So, like, what's the point? This guy's a lunatic, and he's crazy, and he's listening to AC/DC. AC/DC is not satanic. That's another thing. Like Highway, yeah, they have a song Highway to Hell. Yeah. And of course, there's horns and what is it? Angus's hat on the album. Or one of the band members. I think it's Angus. So of course they put that 1978 album or 79 when it came out. I think it was 79.
mm,
You know, years before the Night Stalker,
right.
did his killing. So of course, but then at the time, it was the Satanic Panic, and it
Yeah.
was Judas Priest was getting sued because a couple kids killed themselves while
Right.
listening to
Right.
Priest. That was a
And,
famous.
no, and it doesn't help that Ramirez was a fan of AC/DC. He wore an AC/DC hat, and by all accounts, also had an AC/DC shirt, which
Yeah,
that's no offense. Like now, like and it's funny. I think the press kind of like press always have to cause satanic panic, and it's funny you said in the court he did that famous thing where he said, I'm not even
yeah.
gonna say that I say Hail Jesus. I'm not gonna say the other one, but.
That picture always disturbed.
Disturbing. I will not pull it up. I mean, maybe I don't know how I feel if I use it for the maybe not because that's scary. Like that is creepy.
I used to be really scared of it. There were two pictures that really, really, really scared me.
And can we talk about how creepy Ramirez looks?
Oh, well, he used to stare at people with his eyes and stick out his tongue like a snake.
It's creepy.
Yeah,
Like, even just looking at photos on my notes and on like Wikipedia, it's just disturbing.
he was definitely if there is Satan demons in the world, like a real life Reagan, this guy was. And the detective said it. The detective felt very uncomfortable around them. Like he said, there's something seriously wrong with this guy, you know. Um, and the whole Satan thing, like it doesn't get into like Son of Sam and stuff. It gets deep into the Satanism rituals and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Ramirez would just leave, you know, symbols, pentagrams and carve Jack the Ripper in there. He did go to libraries and get books out on like I forgot what the books were, like really twisted stuff, like human anatomy or like like hunting and demonology and stuff like that. And
Which is creepy.
and the guy who worked in the bookstore was freaked out when he in the documentary when he found out who Ramirez was. He's like, oh my god, that was the Night Stalker, you know. So yeah, that about wraps up, the Richard Ramirez story.
And I think I think we reached like the good mark to
Yeah.
conclude. You did a fantastic job, man. And I will say for our fans out there, we will definitely do extra commentary on this case. I think if I may ask you, Cheech, why did you pick Ramirez for like the first, not the first true crime episode,
Um.
but I want to say the inaugural episode.
Well, I grew up in it. So being a teenager, and I didn't live in California, but like I grew up in, Portchester, and it was on the news about the killings. But I didn't think anything of it until he got caught.
Mm,
And then the ACDC thing connected with me. That resonated with me. And then the Satan thing resonated with me. And I was like, wait a second, this guy's sick, you know? And I read about him in the paper, and the ACDC thing, the satanic thing, because you got, the satanic panic was like all over the 80s. And those were the kids that were going to the court that were like, supporting him, like he was a rock star and stuff. I actually knew a guy whose brother was really sick and nuts. He
mm,
was corresponding with Charles Manson in the early years of the computer. He was talking to Charles Manson through the computer. Like, so there's like people like that are just so fascinated about serial killers, like they want to meet them and like they worship them and stuff like that. It's
mm,
pretty sick. Um, and I just knew a lot about Ramirez because, like, as time went on, I studied the true crime stuff, and Ramirez always stuck in my mind because he was so creepy and scary, and he was so brutal. His killings were so brutal, like um, Dahmer, the Son of Sam, and Richard Ramirez were the three that I really, really got into, and I knew a lot about. So I chose Ramirez first because I just it was I knew a lot about it. I wrote the Son of Sam one, and I know a lot about the Son of Sam because I also lived during that period, and from watching and reading the book The Ultimate Evil and Manny Grossman's podcast. So I really did a pretty lengthy episode on that, which is going to be might be two parts because there's a lot of stuff on the Son of Sam. But yeah, that's why I picked Ramirez between the ACDC, the satanic stuff, and just how evil he was. Just the way he looked, just so I couldn't look at him for years. It doesn't scare me much anymore now, but like I remember seeing that pentagram and being like, oh, I can't look at that. It's just kind of. But I think he was dabbling in the occult more than dabbling. I think maybe he made a deal with the fucking devil and was doing Satan's bidding. You know what I
yeah.
mean? We come
Well,
from like that kind of, mentality that we believe. I believe in that stuff. I
right.
believe.
Well, that's confirmed. There's a book by a Catholic I want to call him like evangelist or apologist. His name is he's an ex LAPD cop. His
Yeah.
name is Jesse Romero. You should look into that. I mean, I'll send you videos of his
Yeah.
podcast. Or he claims that during one of his stints at a maximum prison, he encountered Richard Ramirez. And this was before I really knew about who this dude was. And
Yeah.
his book is called His Encounters with the Satanic, and he lists that at one of his top.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's no coincidence, and I think that definitely, I'll be honest, like part Satan does fuel this. I mean, I know
Oh,
a lot of people who don't believe it may be hard to believe, but if you get obsessed with Satan or and I that's why I get satanic panic. Like I get it. Like I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't mess with
well,
that stuff.
the Satanic Panic. The '80s was full. It was the backlash of the '70s. So the 70s, there was a lot of satanic shit going on, especially in California, Anton
Well, that's
LaVey.
what I'm saying. Like I get it. Like, but the problem is a lot of bands, like heavy metal bands, who in a way they should have been careful.
Well, well, in the 80s, you had bands that were out there like Venom, at war with Satan and stuff
Mm,
like that. You had, obviously Sabbath and, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. That album covers evil. So a lot of people would take, these great bands and put it into like their Satan stupid mentality, and it's not
right,
about that. It's art, it's music, it's heavy metal,
right.
and that's where the Satanic Panic was fueled by some of that. But I don't know why in the 80s it got so popular. It just got, there were cults popping up. And Geraldo Rivera was the king of that. Have you ever heard of him?
I
Geraldo, you
heard
can
of him.
go on YouTube and put on Geraldo Rivera interviewing Anton LaVey or saying this, and Geraldo would talk about, the satanic panic. Don't let your kids listen to Iron Maiden; they will become Satanists. And it was like some of it was really stupid and silly, but then some of it, there was this one vampire cult where this kid went on a spree and he was killing people and thinking he was a vampire and stuff. Like a lot of sick shit happened in the 80s, you know. It was the aftermath of the Son of Sam and Manson and Jonestown, all that crazy stuff that bled into the 80s. And I got to say, California was really where the stuff was happening. California and New York,
Right, right.
was where like a lot of crazy stuff. New York calmed down. There wasn't any serial killers in the 80s in New York after the Son of Sam because that was the 70s. But it was pretty creepy, creepy stuff, which is so fascinating to me. I've always been fascinated by serial killers that were inspired by the occult,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
something that goes back to, like, I don't know, maybe it's the Jimmy Page and me or the geezer from the lyrics, that, like, they wrote about some of this stuff too. Judas Priest has a great song called "The Ripper," about Jack the Ripper and stuff. So it's in heavy metal. Of course, it's going to be in the lyrics, Satan and in the dark stuff. But you got to be really sick to take that shit personal. Like, oh yeah, yeah, I'm going to go out and do that stuff. You're mentally ill if that happens. Like the two kids that shot themselves by listening to Judas Priest. That is not Judas Priest's fault. They sued Judas Priest. AC/DC had nothing to do with Richard Ramirez. Nothing. Nothing to do with it. The guy just liked their music, and they had an album called Highway to Hell, and he was a Satanist and he killed people. And they had a song called The Night Prowler, and he was a Night Stalker, you know, nothing to do with each other. So, but I hope I did a good job on painting a picture about this psychopath.
No, you did, man. That was like really riveting and fascinating.
Yeah, and if you want to know more, what's the name of the documentary? Back to my notes, if I could find it. Give me a second. The Night Stalker, an American Serial Killer on Netflix. I think it's 3 episodes. Pretty much covers the first episode covers everything I talked about. The second, I think, gets into his capture, and that's where the real footage is of him getting off the bus and stuff like that, and him getting
Mm.
beat down. And then the third episode is his trial, and you get to see the pentagram and the satanic panic people, like, you know, which is crazy. So we did our first full length true crimes, and there'll be more
Fun.
to come.
Oh, well,
The
not
next,
fun, but fascinating.
yeah, yeah. Uh, and the next one will be the Son of Sam, which is going to be it's going to be maybe 3 episodes because there's the
Mm.
debate I was telling you about between, just to throw, not a spoiler, but just between Manny Grossman,
Right.
Love, and Maury Terry's theories. They both have theories about the Son of Sam, and as a journalist, mindset, I want to approach it that way and maybe give my opinion, but I don't want to offend anybody,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but so anyway, great job, um, and hopefully you learned about, if you're into true crime, hopefully I gave you some knowledge, and Manny definitely broke down the psychological aspect of it. I love that, I mean, and here's a question for you, Manny. Could you be a serial killer and come from a normal background? I mean, there's got to be somebody out there.
It could be. That's if you're, I mean, I'm from like on the spot. I'm not. So I guess you can come at two angles. If you're born a sociopath or psychopath, or if you were offered up to Satan,
Yeah,
yes. But assuming if the family, let's say it was a normal family that loves Satan or something,
yeah.
because it's possible. But that being
But
said, but
but like at the same time, you know, not defending Satanists at all, but like Anton LaVey, um, he never hurt anybody. You know what I mean? So
well,
I
the thing
think
is,
it's
there's a famous saying that the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing that he, did not
yeah.
exist or is harmless. I'll be honest, yeah, Anton LaVey is evil. I mean,
Oh no, 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 he's evil, but like when I've seen him in interviews, he never like he never killed anybody or anything.
no, 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 he doesn't. But I feel like he worships it in secret,
What I think what he did, I'm not, like I said, I'm not defending him at all. He made the book, the Satanic Bible,
which
that
was influential with.
exactly that made.
So he's an idiot because in a way, I mean, I get it. He doesn't want to be connected with this, but by writing that, he becomes connected because.
and
And,
and
and,
you
and that was the problem with like AC/DC because they write a weird song, Night Prowler, which is strange. I think rock and roll has that. Also, Iron Maiden has those famous songs,
well,
Killers.
that's what was going on in England, in Australia. There were prowlers, there were robbers. You'd be asleep. They weren't pulling a
Right,
Richard.
right. But the fact that they're getting glamorized in a rock song, I mean, I'm not trying to say that
Yeah,
the serial killers will love that because it's like, man, like,
yeah,
and
yeah,
AC/DC definitely is aggressive music. Like,
yeah,
you listen to songs like Dirty Deeds, Done Dirt, like it's
yeah.
aggressive. Like anyone that, I feel like metal is an outlet for aggression and Ramirez being highly aggressive,
And
obviously,
weak-minded people will take that seriously
yes.
and do harm with it. And that always, it got
No,
me mad.
and the subject matter of a song like let's say Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, do you know
Yeah.
it's about a guy that does dirty deeds and he doesn't like he'll and
Yeah.
it's funny, it's a funny song, but at the same time like anybody that would actually commit this stuff would be like, oh yeah, like
But it's like, leave the rock and roll bands alone. It's not,
yes.
they're not like, like the press or whatever. It's music, it's art. It's the sick person who's taking it and,
Yep.
and doing it.
Yep.
And, you know, LaVey, he set the path by writing that book. And to him, if you ask him, do you worship the devil? I'm pretty sure he would say no. He would say, I'm an
Which
atheist.
is just the false deceivement because they do. I mean, at the end of the day, like they do. I mean, if not worship, they definitely are promoting him.
Oh, yeah, yeah. When you
And one
write this,
has to be careful because Satanism is real. Like I hate to,
oh,
there are
yeah,
satanic cults, and Ramirez is a product of this.
oh, definitely. And when you
And then just
write,
going back, and just before I forget the point you made about like if a serial killer can be made from a normal family, in my opinion, no. Only if they're born a natural sociopath or psychopath. But you know what's funny? The people that are born in normal families, if they do have any like of those tendencies, they become sociopaths,
yeah,
not psychopaths.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Serial killers, I feel like are made. Like I'm not
yeah.
gonna lie, you're not born, and if they're made, also they're under the influence of something satanic.
Oh, yeah, you have to be to kill like that. It's pure evil.
Oh,
I mean,
it's horrible.
I mean, any of those things I've always stayed away from. Like, like I've, like Ouija boards. I remember playing with a Ouija board,
Yeah, yeah.
when I was young, and like shit happened, and simple, like even like I, in a past life, let's say I did this tarot cards thing, I always felt uncomfortable being a Roman Catholic. I always felt like, where are you getting your information from? You know what I mean? From these
Well,
cards.
that's the thing. Like, even if you're not religious, because I know you and I like the occult, it's like something similar as voodoo. I mean,
I'm not putting down tarot cards for people that do it and stuff. That's cool.
no,
That's
no,
your thing.
no, no. But I had that same idea too because so tarots are so mysterious. Like, I would love to do an episode on tarot cards and their history, on where exactly they came from, because that's what I was wondering. Where do they get their info from? Like, where? Like,
Yeah,
how is it that these cards? It's like Jungian archetypes. These
yeah,
cards are embedded with like archetypes, right? But
yeah.
how is it how do they know?
That
And it's
that I
crazy. They've been doing tarot cards for centuries.
I've done them a few times, and everything that I was told came true.
Yeah.
And but a lot of it is, I think, maybe the power of suggestion. Maybe. Uh, I definitely know Ouija boards move. I've done that as a kid and was like, whoa, whoa, I'm done. I'm done with this. So
Well,
like
most people that get influenced by the occult claim Ouija boards are a window. Like,
oh,
they become converts to Christianity, and they
oh
confirm
yeah,
that Ouija boards become a window. Also, back to the tarot card readings, and like, I have stories like my dad had a reading done for him, and I'll be honest, it came true. Like, in
mm,
a sense, it could be suggestion. I mean, I'm not saying, but again, I love that what you said. Like, where are they getting their power from? I think no one really talks about that. It's sort of like the crystal ball kind of idea, even though that's like that could be a sham. But
yeah. Yeah, I think it's cool. It's a cool thing to do at the Renaissance Fair. If you're drunk on mead, do some tarot cards. That I did, and then I was like, "What am I fucking doing? Why did I do this? Because I'm scared of this shit deep down. You know what I mean? As much as I've, read books on the occult, I've been fascinated by Crowley and LaVey and read about them. But that's it. Lovecraft.
you have like
That
I think like a maybe like a Jimmy Page fascination. But I think Jimmy Page probably did something.
no, I don't think so.
Okay, so
I
you just had a fascination. And the
I think
Beatles, dude.
I,
It's on the Beatles.
yeah.
Sergeant
Jimmy Page
Pepper.
put some kind of magic into his music, maybe, because you're putting your energy into music, and you could be like a magician in that way, because you're moving people. um but I studied all that stuff, Order of the Golden Dawn, Crowley and stuff. But for me, I always felt a little bit, remember Fabio at the temple?
Yeah.
He was into that stuff too, and we would always talk about, it's a natural feeling when you're brought up a Catholic and you're religious, that you feel uncomfortable. I always felt uncomfortable, like, even,
Well,
like,
because you're in the light.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I mean, not to get too religious on this, but like
yeah,
one of my our viewers out there, and she knows like one of my expertises in like obviously me growing up Catholic, but I've always been fascinated by Catholicism, and so even Jesus says that, like, when you read the Gospels, he says, if you choose to remain in darkness, you'll be in darkness, but the light will reveal. So it's like sort of that idea when you're filled with light and you encounter this stuff, it should creep you out and kind of like,
yeah.
ooh, I don't know about this.
It always creeped me out, but I always just had an interest in it, and I blame my heroes, Jimmy Page and Geezer, for writing about it, and me being like, oh, I gotta go out and get an Alistair Crowley book. I gotta, or meeting, people, like-minded people. And but as long as you read it, and it's just fascinating, and it inspires you to, like, maybe write a song about it or something. But that's it. Don't even Geezer said it, like, we're entertainers. We're not
And
doing this.
Geezer, I think, is a Catholic.
Yeah, they,
I think only Ozzy took himself too seriously.
yeah, none of them did. The people that take it seriously, not knocking it and anything, but it's not my cup of tea. I'm a Roman Catholic, and but there's always that interest in, curiosity and stuff that you just have as a human being,
True,
but
true.
but
And I will say on that note, on that dark note, we will conclude this episode. This has been the Cheech and Manny music show, but for tonight, the Cheech and Manny true crime show.
Yep.
And this is our technically second episode, but I'm calling it inaugural because it definitely delved into a true crime case. This has been so fascinating. I want to make sure I told the audience out there, Chris did such a great job. I loved listening to it. I know this is one of your passions and look forward to many more. And in the
But
comments below, comment, what do you think about this? Have you heard of Richard Ramirez? Did you learn something from us? Have you learned something?
yeah,
What did you like about Cheech's lecture on this first serial killer, one of many, and he is very infamous. He's probably one of the most infamous ones in true
he's
crime.
he's in the top three. Son of Sam, Dahmer, Ramirez.
Right,
They're definitely they're in there. Bundy and John Wayne Gacy. Those are the top
right.
five that I've always studied. Um, there's a great show. I think it's called Mindhunter.
I heard about it. It was recommended to me.
They invented the profiling, and they interview all these people. It's really based on that. So if you like true crime, so definitely leave comments. Any other true crimes? As I'm thinking there's another one right in our backyard that I would love to talk about. The murder in Greenwich. Martha Moxley. You've heard about that? The Kennedy killed her. You never heard about that? It was called the murdering a girl. A Greenwich girl got murdered with the golf club by one of the Kennedys.
No,
Uh, yeah, but I think it was Skakel was his name. I have to go back and brush up on that.
I mean, we could touch
But
upon it in another episode. That sounds
it's
fascinating.
a great true crime story. So, any true crime stories, please let us know. We'll definitely do our research on it. And I hope you enjoyed the first one. I know it was pretty dark and pretty evil, but I don't know. That's just I've been attracted to the Son of Sam and Ramirez, and even Dahmer was watching The Exorcist too. Three, you know what I mean?
I
He's
think that
another
was his
twist.
favorite. I think that was his favorite, which is like frightening. And that movie definitely has something frightening with it. Like,
Yeah, so they're
um,
all dabbling in the dark on the dark side,
right, right,
So,
right.
but anyway, uh, great episode. We got out of our comfort zone, which is nice for the second time, and did our non-music. We only brought up Rush, and I think we brought up AC/DC,
And
obviously.
and
So we,
Springsteen on my end. I
of
think
course, that was a good. That's a great song. I did, that I did for a song. I'm gonna look that guy up. But we'll keep you updated on the New England serial killer, and let us know how you feel about Ramirez. Watch the documentary on him, and hopefully you learn something. If you're into true crime, or you just think we're just a couple of crazy dudes talking about
if you
a
think
lunatic.
we're a couple of crazy dudes, just comment below. I mean, I'm fascinated with obviously for me a psychological perspective. These fascinate
Yeah.
me because these are truly deviants of humanity.
Oh, yeah.
So they're the outliers, the people. And also learn something. Be careful out there. Stay safe, and you know, yeah, be safe.
Yeah. Don't go in the woods in New England right now.
No, don't go hiking alone. Be careful with New Haven, Norwalk,
Yeah.
Rhode Island,
Yeah. And
and
and stay away from Taylor Swift's house if you could.
don't go vacationing over there.
Yeah. Stay away. But all
But
right. So the next podcast, we'll see you soon. Take care, everybody out there, and like and subscribe to the Cheech and Manny show, the People's Show.
the People's True Crime Podcast.
Yeah.
All right, Cheech. All right, Cheech, my friend. Have a good night. Till next one.
Have a good one. Take
You
care.
too.